update on the number of cases that our office has moved in 2025, as well as some historical context. This office has been through a pretty significant turmoil, I mean, for lack of a better word, over the last 5 years. And so I thought it was really important to provide context for 2025's numbers, going back to at least 2019, which was our last year pre-COVID. COVID changed, had a pretty significant impact on our criminal justice system and the way that the office conducted business. And so I think, as we go through the presentation, you'll see some pretty clear trends from 2019 to 2020 to 2021, 22, 23, 24, and then 2025. And so I'm really proud of the progress that our office has made. I mean, just being here and getting a sense of, we were moving cases and being in the courtroom. And so when I had an opportunity to dig into the data since the end of 2025 and this first week of 2026, was really happy that the data bared that out. The feeling that we were making progress, I think that's very clear from the data, and happy to share it. And the other thing I want to say is frankly how unprecedented this is. I mean, there has not been, none of my predecessors have ever shared case data like this. And so, I'm proud of that fact. During the campaign, I tried to make it a point that, in my opinion, being transparent is more than simply answering questions or making oneself available for questions. Being open and honest about what is actually happening in our court system, not just in one case or two cases or three cases, but systematically. And so I think that's what you'll see going on. In my opinion, this is the overarching headline that I'm most proud of, and it is the reduction in the number of pending cases that we have here in our courthouse. And so between data from last December, there was approximately 12,000 pending criminal cases here in the county courthouse, over 7,000 felonies, and approximately 5,000 misdemeanors. In that 1 year time frame, cases coming into the office, we charge cases every day and we dispose of cases every day. And so this is constantly in flux, cases coming in, cases going out. And the pending cases is a snapshot of where we are right now. And so at the end of December 2025, we had reduced the active pending caseload by almost 2,000 cases. We reduced the felony caseload by 1,000 cases, and the misdemeanor caseload also by approximately 1,000. And I know that might not seem like a lot, but when we have 80 lawyers here in the district attorney's office, I have 80 assistant district attorneys to work on 10,000 cases at any given time. So it's a tremendous amount of work. And so the fact that we are able to reduce the active caseload in turn gives our lawyers more time to focus on the cases that they need to, and ensures that cases get the attention that they deserve. So as I mentioned, cases come into the office. Law enforcement agencies present cases to our office for prosecution. When we receive a case from law enforcement, we can either accept a case and file it, meaning we formally charge it in court. We can decline the case, meaning we are not going to move forward, or we can return it to the law enforcement agency for further investigation. This is the historical data for the cases that were filed, meaning that we agreed to charge and move forward with from 2019 to 2025. And so historically, our office charged approximately 10,000 misdemeanors per year and between 7,000 and 8,000 felony cases. And so you can see that in 2019, fairly consistent in 2020, and then in 2021, there is a precipitous drop in the number of cases that our office charged, both felonies and misdemeanors. And I think that can be explained for a number of ways. I mean, there was significant turmoil in the district attorney's office. One of my predecessors, Mr. Rosales, came in, terminated many, many employees. The office lost decades of institutional knowledge, and things were just not being, cases were not being moved. Decisions were not being made on cases. But I also, COVID was happening at the same time, and you will see a trend where the cases drop off, and then they start picking up, and you'll see in 2023, when the interim DA, when Mr. Hicks took over, pursuant to the governor's appointment, that we see a big jump in the filed cases. Mr. Hicks brought back some staff that had been here previously. They started working through the backlog, and so we see a big jump, and then things will kind of settle back to some degree of normalcy. And so the last 2 years, we've seen approximately the same number of cases being charged. And so this is a more specific breakdown of misdemeanor, family violence, and DWI cases. And so it's going to follow that same general trajectory that we saw earlier globally. We see almost 3,000 DWI charges, misdemeanor DWI charges filed in 2019. We're starting to see a drop during COVID. There is a precipitous drop in the number of DWI cases filed in 2021. They come back up, there's a spike, and then they kind of are settled down here around 2,000 DWI, misdemeanor DWI. Still, relative to pre-COVID, we are still seeing a lack of DWI cases. And so in looking at the booking data, we were just seeing fewer arrests. Officers were arresting fewer people for DWI during COVID. And we are still, finally getting back towards a pre-2020 amount of DWI cases. And we see the same thing with the family violence cases. In 2021, our office only filed less than 400 family violence cases. We see them spike again in 2023 and then kind of level off around 1,300 in the last 2 years, which is in fact even more than we were charging back in 2019. Again, the felony caseload basically follows the same pattern. DWIs are in the blue. These are felony DWIs. This is DWI with a child passenger. People who've been their third DWI or more. Intoxic assaults, when someone crashes into someone causing serious bodily injury, and also includes intoxication manslaughter. The family violence cases include repeat family violence offenders, people who cause serious bodily injury in family violence incidents. And then also down here, these much smaller numbers, green is child sex offenses, including aggravated sexual assault against a child, continuous sexual abuse of a child, indecency with a child by sexual contact. And then the blue are the homicide cases. And so again, we see the same pattern of 2019. There's a drop in 2020, a precipitous drop in 21, and then a spike in 23, and then things kind of level off where they were in 2019. So those were the cases coming into the office, the cases that we were charging. Okay. We're going to pivot now to the cases that are being disposed of. And so disposed includes cases that where someone pleads guilty, where cases where we dismiss, or cases where that go to trial and a jury or a judge finds them guilty or not guilty. These are, a case is disposed, meaning it is over with. And so obviously if we file more cases than we dispose of, then the amount of pending cases grows. If we dispose of more cases than we file, then the number of pending cases is reduced. And so here in 2019, these are the felony cases that were gotten rid of, that were disposed, approximately 7,000, 12,000 misdemeanors. 2021, we saw a tremendous amount of misdemeanor cases that were dismissed. The amount of felony cases that were being dismissed was cut in half. Kind of hard to say if that was the direction of the office at the time, was to dismiss misdemeanors but not dismiss felonies. But again, we see the number of cases being moved rise and then kind of level off in the last 2 years. Same thing with the misdemeanors. We see, so this is how they've been disposed. Orange on the bottom are guilty pleas. Pretrial diversion is the blue in the middle, and these are dismissals, either dismissals or acquittals. Ultimately, the person's found not guilty. And so we see here in 2019, there's approximately a close to 50-50 divide on the number of cases where someone is found guilty versus not guilty, where a case is dismissed. We see that change. During COVID, there's a reduction in cases that are getting moved. In 2021, we see a huge increase in the number of cases getting dismissed relative to the number of cases where someone is found guilty. That it drops, almost to 20%. We see kind of the same trend. Far fewer convictions than before, and then we slowly start seeing them come back up. There's still dismissals, a significant number of dismissals, but there are an increase in the number of guilty findings. And so now we've kind of, as you can see, we're still below the ratio of where we would have been in 2019. I think we're still at close to 1/3 relative on the misdemeanor caseload, and so still work to be done to get back to where the office had been. These are the misdemeanor DWI cases and how they've been resolved over the last 6 years, 7 years. And so in 2019, we had over 2,000 DWI convictions, and pretrial diversion. I'll just take a quick step. Pretrial diversion is a program that our office generally offers to first-time offenders. They complete some classes, and they pay a fee, and ultimately the case is dismissed. And so that is generally something that we have done for misdemeanor offenders throughout the office's existence, and so those numbers are here in blue. And so for the DWIs, like I said, we had 2,000 convictions in 2019. They dropped during COVID. We see 21, 22 still remained fairly low, and then they slowly start coming back up. I will tell you in full candor, we want this number to go up. We want more people convicted of DWI. We're getting closer to the same ratio. We need more cases. Law enforcement continues to make arrests. We need to be charging more cases. As I mentioned at the beginning, we're filing fewer DWI cases relative to 2019 because there's fewer arrests, fewer cases being presented. And again, I think the factors behind that are multifarious. A lot of it was COVID. We need to get back to pre-COVID enforcement. I mentioned to Reyes yesterday, law enforcement, the more resources that they commit to DWIs, we're going to see numbers go up, which is what we want. We want to see higher numbers. It doesn't mean that there's more DWI. It just means that we are catching more of them. And so again, the sheriff's office, their DWI task force, the city's DWI unit, the more resources that our law enforcement agencies commit to DWI enforcement, our numbers are going to go higher, and we can start getting back up to, like I said, the pre-2020 ratios. Family violence cases, our office has historically dismissed a lot of them. We charge them, we end up dismissing a significant number. You can see in 2019, Our office obtained 350 family violence convictions, but we dismissed over 900 of them. We saw that trend, again, follow the same trend. Dispositions went down in 2021, a significant number, relative to the number of cases that they disposed of, a significant number was dismissals, and now we're coming back up. Last year, almost 1,400 family violence cases dismissed, 2024. We've reduced that by almost 400 while also maintaining the same number of convictions. And to the extent of to get back to pre-COVID, our office lost institutional knowledge in terms of how to prosecute family violence cases. There is a way, one of the toughest lessons for young lawyers to learn is how to prosecute family violence cases where a victim, a complaining witness, might not be cooperative. There is a way to do that, where we can go to trial and using a 911 call, using independent witnesses, using visible injuries, we can prosecute and convict somebody for domestic violence even if the victim doesn't testify. But that takes knowledge, that takes training, and I would tell you, I think over the course of these 4 years, our office lost that. And so it's a matter of rebuilding that knowledge base, that expertise, and hopefully securing more guilty findings in family violence cases. But it's something that's going to take a lot of training and a lot of work that we're committed to doing. Felonies, in 2019 we had a conviction rate of almost 2/3 guilty to 1/3 dismissals. We saw that kind of drop to closer to 50-50. We had more dismissals, felonies dismissed in 2021 than we had guilty findings. That slowly has gone back up. And this slide, I will tell you, is something that I'm really proud about, because over here in 2025, you can see how hard our lawyers have worked to move cases. Because this year, they disposed of almost 9,000 felonies. When you look at 2019, we disposed of a little over 5,000. And so the fact that our lawyers were able to dispose of 9,000 felony cases at this rate is something that I'm extremely proud of, and they put in a ton of work to get that done. These are the felony DWI numbers. Historically, something to be proud of the entire office. People that are accused of felony DWI, even during these years, we're still being held accountable. Over 90% were found guilty in this time period. And so those have been relatively the same. Again, we saw a tremendous drop-off during COVID. Slowly, things are kind of coming back to pre-COVID disposition rate. Felony family violence cases, again, in 2019, almost a 2-to-1 guilty to not guilty. We saw a big drop during COVID, slowly coming back up. In these 2 years, again, our felony lawyers, moving a tremendous amount of cases, disposing of a lot of cases, and finally getting us to a point where our pending caseload is down. Child sex cases, another thing, another point of pride, particularly in the last year. Again, blue being guilties. We saw, in 2019, close to 50-50. 2021, huge drop in the number of child sex cases that were being resolved. In the entire year, only 13. We see, again, them coming back up. Over the last 4 years, we've had, at least within 2023, 2024, 50-50 in terms of guilty versus not guilty. Last year, 2025, almost 75%. So something we're really proud of. in 2025. Homicides follow the same thing, dropped during COVID. We see significant, not that many cases resolved in 21, 22. As we get out of COVID, 2023, 2024, we see the numbers resolve. 2025, we resolved a fair number of homicide cases. A lot of these here, cases that respectfully probably should not have been charged. Cases that there was probable cause to charge someone, but nowhere near the amount of evidence that we would need to move forward with a trial. So cases that either should not have been charged in the first place or were overcharged. And so we've had to work our way through those as well. Just as an aside, these are, someone will plead to probation, and if they mess up on probation, our office can ask that a judge revoke them and send that person to prison if it's a felony probation, or to the county jail if it's misdemeanor probation. These numbers have stayed relatively the same, at least with the felonies. Judges have been revoking between 500 and 700 felons who were on probation to prison time. In misdemeanor, people that were getting revoked to jail time, it was in 2019, pre-COVID, almost 400. We've seen that drop off during COVID, and it's kind of remained the same. So that might be something that we need to talk to the county court judges, the misdemeanor court judges about, looking to improve. And so again, wanted to come back to the first slide. The amount of work, like I said, you can see the number of cases that are coming in, that are going out. We have been able, over the course of 2025, to have a net positive in the number of cases that we've resolved, to the extent that as of now, we have 2,000 fewer cases now than we did at the end of 2024. And in terms of moving forward into 2026, this is what we have pending right now. So in the misdemeanor caseload, of the close to 4,000 cases that are pending, approximately 1,000 are DWIs, 600 are family violence cases. This is a separate chart showing the age. And the reason why I thought that was really pertinent is because we're getting rid of the oldest cases. And why is that important? That's the backlog. When people are talking about the backlog of cases, when Mr. Hicks and his team came in 2023, charged a bunch of cases that had not been charged during 21 and 22, we are still trying to resolve cases that are misdemeanor cases that are older than 2023. But that's down below 500. The vast majority of our pending misdemeanor cases we charged last year, which is how we want. Likewise, with the felonies, we have almost 6,000 pending felonies. This number here, this is where we got to work on jury trials. We still have almost 100 homicide cases pending, over 100 child sex cases, and you can see the family violence and DWI felonies. Again, significant progress, that the vast majority of the felonies that are pending are felonies that we charged last year in 2025. The number of cases that are pending from 2021, 2022 and older, less than 10% of the active caseload. I didn't include it in the slides, but one of the other things that I'm really proud of is that's part and parcel of disposing of these cases is the amount of defendants who are in pretrial custody, right? And so when I took office in January, in the El Paso County Jail, there was over 300 inmates who had been in pretrial custody for over a year. Over a year in the jail waiting for their trial. And some of these were very serious cases. Murders, sex assaults, aggravated assaults. Over the course of 2025, because we have moved cases, that number is now approximately 225. So, about a little over 200 people that are in the county jail for over a year. It's still more than we would like. We still want to be moving cases as quickly as possible. I've said it before, and I will continue to say it. Justice delayed is justice denied. Time is not helpful to our cases. We want to get them in court as quickly as possible. If somebody's going to plead guilty right away, great. If we're going to dismiss it, great. If we can't come to an agreement, we want that case to go to trial. And I didn't include the trials on this because the data's actually kind of skewed. Because when somebody is acquitted at a trial, they get it expunged. And so if you try to find data from 2019 or 2020 on people who were found not guilty at trial, the vast majority of those have been expunged. And cases that get dismissed throughout the years, they also get expunged. And so if you try to dig into the trials too much, the data doesn't tell a full story. But the reason I bring that up is our goal moving forward is to have more jury trials. We are getting there. We are finally kind of getting back to a pre-COVID trial schedule here in the courthouse. In 2025, we saw more trials. We want to keep that happening. People wonder, or sometimes I get questions, well, why do you do these certain cases? Where do you come up with these numbers? Well, that's because we take cases to trial. And see, Texas is one of the few states where the jury decides someone's punishment. And so when we have a jury trial and a jury finds somebody guilty and they assess a punishment, the jurors, the citizens of El Paso, tell this courthouse what they see justice like in our community. And so what a jury decides in a jury trial informs us and informs the defense bar and informs the judiciary on what kind of outcomes they want to see in their criminal justice system. And so this is also a call to people to continue showing up for jury duty. We are going to press the judiciary and this courthouse to continue having more and more trials because we want to hear from the citizens on what kind of criminal justice system you want to see. And so we, now that we have worked through this pending backlog of cases and now that our lawyers have some time to be able to focus on cases that we can take to trial. But I know that was a lot of information, a lot of numbers, and so I will take some questions. Yes, sir.
The disposal rate, is that higher than the cases coming in, or how close is it?
Yeah, well, so I can tell you they're separate, right? The number of cases coming in and the number of cases that we're disposing are separate, but what I can tell you is that over the course of 2025, we disposed of 1,000 more misdemeanors than we charged, and we disposed of 1,000 more felonies than we charged.
And then the years that are listed there, that's January to December?
Correct. Yes.
And then with a not guilty information on there, you were referring to it as dismissals.
Yeah, so great question. I should have mentioned it earlier. So guilty is someone who is either found guilty at a trial by a judge or a jury, or they pleaded guilty. Not guilty includes cases that were dismissed or cases where someone was acquitted, found not guilty, or a case that was dismissed.
And for people who have been in jail for that amount of time that you're referring to, or still in jail for those number of years, does that have anything to do with bail reform in Texas, or how does that impact?
No, I mean, I think people were staying in custody. I mean, people that stay in jail generally are accused of very serious crimes. Their bond is set that they can't make it, and frequently the case just can't be resolved. Either the person doesn't want to plead guilty, or the parties do not come to an agreement, and so the only resolution is to go to trial. And so frequently, a lot of these cases where someone was in pretrial custody for a year, 2 years, 3 years, the accusations were very, very serious. Like I said, usually they're murder, they're child sex offenses, where neither side can come to an agreement, and so there has to just be a trial. And I would tell you, the more trials they are, it encourages the lawyers to resolve their cases without them, because once we get a sense of where the community is, it informs us on how we need to move forward without a trial. Yes, sir.
Can we talk about staffing? How
Sure.
many prosecutor positions are currently unfilled, and what are you doing to recruit and retain staff?
Yeah. So right now we have 77 active assistant district attorneys. We have 6 lawyers who are 6 law graduates who are hoping to get licensed this year. And so right now, and so we actually have positions committed for them. And so right now we have 4 grant-funded positions that are unfilled.
What about the recruitment?
Yeah, so that's where those 6 lawyers, we're going out to law schools. You know, one of the things I was really proud of in 2025 was our summer intern program. You know, in the past, I was an intern here in this office, both as an undergraduate, as a college student, and in law school. In 2025, one of the real big priorities of mine was to bring in El Pasoans who are in law school other places. Or, you know, obviously El Pasoans have to leave for law school. And, you know, one of the strategies that people had considered was, you know, they go to law school recruiting fairs and try to get people to move to El Paso. In my opinion, it's a lot easier to convince somebody who's from El Paso to come back home than, you know, convince somebody from Dallas or Carthage or somewhere to move to El Paso, to somewhere where they've never been. And so I'm really proud of the fact that over the summer in 2025, we had 12 interns. 10 of them were law students. 11 of them were law students. They were all El Pasoans. We're going to have a significant number of them come back this summer. We have 2 of them that are going to start next month practicing now. Even though they're still in law school, they're still able to practice. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing El Pasoans that want to practice law. This is the place to start their career, and I'm confident we are on that way to filling those entry-level positions.
Can you talk about the border protection grant? About $6 million your office is.
Yeah, so BPU is a grant that's authorized by the state legislature and distributed by the governor to counties that are either on the border or adjacent to the border. The grant requires lawyers work on specific cases. And so in some ways the grant is limiting, because if they're not working on those specific cases, they can't work on anything else. And we've actually removed lawyers off the grant and into general fund positions currently so that they can work on more cases. So for instance, if a lawyer is on the border prosecution grant, well, they can't work on DWIs or family violence cases because those aren't border prosecution type crimes. And so I would rather have a lawyer in a general fund position that is able to work on all the crimes than just a specific number. But I will say the governor's office, we've obtained a significant amount of funding. These are positions that we want to fill. We want to get more proactive in the types of cases that the grant allows us to work on. Kind of the idea was we got to focus on the core mission of the office, and once that has been solidified, we can start getting into some of the more specialized prosecutions. Yes, ma'am.
Where are you with the backlog of cases?
Yeah, so that term was used to describe one particular area, and so where the backlog of cases, when you heard about it in the last 4 years, about 10,000 cases, 14,000 cases. The backlog was in our intake section. And so what happens, as I mentioned, law enforcement agencies send their cases to us. And we get cases. Our number one agency, of course, that sends the cases, the El Paso Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, the Community College Police Departments, Anthony Horizon, Socorro PD, UTEP PD, DPS, all of the El Paso law enforcement agencies that send us cases. They present them to our office. On average, they send us between 25 and 30,000 cases per year for potential prosecution. Then we have to have a lawyer. They send us the case. We have to input it in our system, and then a lawyer reviews it and decides, are we going to file a charge, are we going to decline a charge, or are we going to return it to the agency? The backlog started in 2021 where law enforcement agencies were sending our cases to us, and then nothing was happening. And for 2021, 2022, the cases just kept piling up. But because they're sent electronically, it used to be a paper presentation. They would bring us a file, you could see the cases pile. But we're past that now, and so the electronic queue is just growing and growing and growing until it reached over 10,000, That is gone. Those cases have been filed. I know my predecessor, that's why we saw that huge kind of increase in cases in 2023. We were charging crimes in 2023 and 2024. We were charging crimes that had actually happened in 2020, in 2021, in 2022. That is not how we want to operate, right? We want to be charging cases as quickly as we can. If a crime happens in 2025, we want to charge it in 2025. If it happens in 2026, we want to charge it in 2026. So the backlog of cases from 2021, 2022, those are gone. To the extent that they're, right now, I am certain that right now in 2026, we still have cases that law enforcement sent us at the end of 2025 that we still need to make a decision on whether we're going to move forward or not. So even though the crime happened in 2025, we're not going to charge it until 2026. But to the extent that there was a backlog in 21, in 22, and 23, it's gone.
So it's just, right now you're handling pretty much 2025, 2026
Yeah,
cases?
yeah.
So no more 2024 is gone?
I haven't looked at the specific numbers in intake that are what we call in screening. We're pre-filed. I'm sure that there are probably some from 2024 that are still there. I mean, if there's a homicide or an unsolved hit and run that's pending from then that will still be pending.
When it comes to plea deals, what impact does input from the victims and families make that?
Yeah.
Make that decision?
So these are our cases, right? As your elected district attorney, I am the representative of the community in the criminal justice system. And I tell that to the assistant DAs. We are here to represent the community's interests. We don't represent victims directly, personally, but they are our witnesses. They're our complainants. And so we need to, I tell the lawyers every time I speak to them and to our victim advocates, they're who we need to listen to. We need to get their voice and their perspective before we decide how to resolve a case. One of the first policies I implemented in 2025 is a requirement that we call victims before we get rid of the case. I know, it's something so basic that was not a policy before. And so, at the beginning of 2025, one of the things that I was dealing a lot with was upset victims whose cases had been dismissed or pleaded guilty, and they had never even been contacted. We have working to minimize that. Like I said, it is now an office policy that prosecutors need to call the victims before we dispose of their case and hear them out and hear what they want. Frequently, the victim's interest and the state's interest are the same, but sometimes they diverge. I mean, sometimes victims want us to move forward on cases where the evidence is insufficient or the evidence that is there doesn't suggest that a crime happened. And so, the interest of the victim or the desires of the victim diverge from the state's interest, the community's interest. But, the other time is family violence cases. They're a perfect example where sometimes the victims don't want us to move forward. They want the case to dismiss, but there's a state interest, a community's interest in moving forward with the case, and we're going to continue to do that.
And the boom up then, like as far as was really strong on domestic violence cases and prosecuting them, and we just kind of saw that disappear.
Right.
Where are you guys at with that? Are you starting up that program?
Yeah, so we secured a domestic violence grant also from the state. Some of it's state funded, some of it's federal funded. We are looking to rebuild that institutional knowledge. We do take family violence cases seriously. We're going to, there was a time in 2021 where if a victim wanted a case dismissed, came in, or not even came in, just signed a piece of paper saying they didn't want to move forward, this office dismissed the case. That is unacceptable. That is a very antiquated way of prosecuting domestic violence that we do not deal with here anymore. We're moving towards an evidence-based prosecution. We will look at a case. If we can prosecute a case without the victim based on the 911 call, the injuries, we will do that because family violence cases and misdemeanor DWIs come down to homicide prevention. The earlier that we can intervene and deter somebody from future misconduct in the hope that lives are saved, in the future. So I'll take one last question.
Really quick on the intake
Yeah.
process, you mentioned that, of course, you guys work with several agencies.
Mhm.
Do you know more or less approximately how many law enforcement agencies? Because people may not know. They may just think, oh, it's just El Paso PD or
Right.
it's just CSO. Approximately how many law enforcement agencies do you guys work with? And if you have an idea of more or less an average of intake cases that you guys receive?
Yeah. So I couldn't give you a specific number of agencies and where they come from. I'm certain that we have those numbers. The vast majority of our cases come from the El Paso Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, DPS. We have cases that come from the smaller municipalities, Socorro, Horizon, Anthony. We have the San Elizario Marshal's Office. We sometimes get cases from the Office of the Attorney General, Health and Human Services. If there's welfare, if there's suspected welfare fraud, we get cases from the wardens, the game wardens from the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. If people are dumping, and so our cases come from a wide variety of agencies, but by far the vast majority are El Paso PD and the Sheriff's Office. But UTEP PD, each of the school districts have their own police department. Community has its own police department. So it's a wide variety. But I appreciate everybody's time this afternoon. I know the numbers can be, one thing that's important to me is that, and I've been asked about it before, about conviction rates. And it's something that I tell the lawyers, which is justice isn't a number. We are not asking, hey, we need to be making this minimum percentage of cases because I think that skews the idea of justice being decided on each individual case. And so this is never going to be an office that says, that I tell my lawyers, you need to be getting this many convictions because that is not an appropriate use of prosecutorial discretion. Each case needs to be judged on its own. But, to the extent that the numbers bear out, larger trends, I think they're important to look at. And so I appreciate you all joining on this Friday afternoon. And we can email the presentation in a PDF. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you all. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to head out. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you all.